Salutations, this is Crazed Kitsune, aka Khuma'zi Tayuun, and welcome to Healers for Dummies. This is a basic tips guide for how to be a healer in Final Fantasy XIV. Healer, at first glance, seems like a very simple thing, but there are a few important details some healers tend to forget. A healer, by definition, heals their party. This is their first priority, keeping everybody alive. If you have the time to safely do it, go ahead and deal some damage. But if the fight is currently really healing intensive, you should probably not be using up your cast time. You should probably not be using cast times to attack, because that could end very badly very quickly. Finding the balance between healing and damaging is hard. I personally prefer to focus almost entirely on healing and do very little damage. With the change to Stormblood and how healers' damage is calculated, I may start doing it a bit more, but I'm probably still going to be more passive than most healers. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, for a healer to do their job in most fights, you're going to want to keep your distance from the enemies. Most AoEs in general don't reach too far away from the enemy, so if you're far away, you're usually safe. There's the odd time where they might toss a circle directly at you, so you have to step out of it. There's also the odd time where some enemies will have fairly long-range conal or linear AoEs, which you're going to have to step out of. But if you know that they're going to have long-range conals, then you're going to definitely stand more around the mid-range, so that you're not standing in a really wide portion of a cone, giving you a much harder time getting out of the way. Positioning as a healer is surprisingly important, even if you're never attacking anything, because you don't want to be hit by stuff. You getting hit is a problem, because then you have to heal yourself. If you get hit by something that kills you, well, the rest of your party's not going to have a good time, because now they don't have a healer. And without a healer, well, they're going to die. But as a healer, your top priority for healing is the tank. Keeping the tank alive is the most important thing. Immediately following that is keeping yourself alive. Because if the tank dies, then the enemies are just going to turn around and start playing merry havoc with the rest of your party. If you die, well, the enemies are going to slowly kill the tank and then turn and eat the DPS. This does not mean ignore your DPS. Ignoring your DPS means that if they die, well, they're not doing any damage anymore, so it takes longer for the enemies to die, so you're more likely to run out of MP, and therefore everybody dies. As a healer, you need to be watching your party's health, you need to be watching their status, you need to be watching for AoEs coming your way. There's quite a bit you need to keep track of. And it can be difficult. Healing isn't for everybody. Don't feel ashamed if you don't enjoy it for a variety of reasons, because there are lots of them. Just find what you enjoy and play it. Now, for healers, I personally tend to keep my target lock on the tank. With the release of Stormblood, there are some changes to the combat system, which I'm not sure if I'm going to have trouble with that. As things are before Stormblood, as a healer, all of my attack spells have target of target macros set up so that I can just attack the tank's target while targeting the tank. But changes have been made to how skills work for certain classes, and so I may not be able to do that. I may have to actually target enemies. We'll see. But I would generally recommend keeping your target lock on the tank most of the time, simply because the tank is the one who's going to be taking the most damage. They're the ones whose health you're going to have to watch the most closely. As they take damage, you're going to need to be healing them to keep their health up high enough for them to not be killed by things like a tank buster attack. Some healers will tell you that, oh, you don't have to keep the tank topped up, you don't need to keep their health very high, you could let them get to like half health. Please don't do that. There are tank busters that do over half a tank's health in one shot. If you let the tank sit at half health, they're going to die. Try to keep them at or close to maximum health, simply to avoid that. This, of course, does not mean spam your heals constantly, even when the tank hasn't taken much damage. Healing does draw aggro. Not as much as most skills, but if you're casting way too many heals, you could still rip aggro. And it's a very bad thing when the enemies start attacking the healer. Which brings me to a very important point as healer. If you get enemy aggro, run towards the tank. Do not run away. Do not try to avoid the enemy. Lead it to the tank so it's easier for them to take it off of you. I know your natural instinct is to run away, to panic. Don't. Stay calm and take the scary thing to the person whose job it is to keep the scary things off of you. Now, healers generally have a couple of healing spells. Scholar really only has the one main healing spell. They have various other skills, and I'll get into that later, but healers usually have a basic heal and a tier 2. They also have a revive spell, which, after you reach a certain level, you can revive people in combat. This is very, very useful when fights are starting to go kind of badly. It's not ideal if people die, especially the tank, but it happens, and that's why you can revive. Reviving somebody, they will suffer the weakness debuff, causing them to lose 15% of their stat total for the next minute or so, I believe. It might actually be several minutes, and it's not a good thing to have this debuff, but it's better to have this debuff on party members than to have them just sitting there dead. If they die again too soon, shortly after they died before, and you revive them, they will have Brink of Death, which takes off 30% of all of their stats. This is very bad. If a fight is going this horribly, there might be some problems to figure out. You might not be healing enough, they might be standing in stuff, they may just not be geared enough for the content, who knows. There are lots of things that could be going wrong, and none of them are fun. Now, one of the trickiest things for healer is the fact that you're watching so many things. It's easy to lose track of whether or not people are getting negative status effects. It's also hard to remember which ones can and cannot be removed, because there are some that can't. Most can, some can't. If you're ever not sure if you can remove a debuff from a party member, try. It does cost a bit of your MP to do this, But there are certain situations where you really don't want debuffs on people, especially the tank. If the tank gets any kind of debuff that you can remove, do it immediately. Except in certain fights. But that's something that I won't be covering. Learning where and when to use your skills, which heals to use when, whether or not you can cleanse something and whether or not it should be cleansed. Watching your party members' health, watching their status, occasionally checking to make sure that you don't have too much hate on everything because you may have been healing a little too hard. It can be daunting to be a healer. I personally love it, and I actually find it fairly relaxing most of the time. But some people find it really stressful. Some people find it really boring. If healer's for you, awesome. Do your best to keep your party alive, and if you get the chance, do a bit of damage to help things die faster. But don't focus on damage. That's not your job. That's the DPS's job. And to a certain extent, the tank. But we'll get into that another time. As it is, I believe I've covered everything. Heal your party, do damage if you have the opportunity without sacrificing your party's health for it. Dodge attacks so you don't die. Use your skills intelligently. And just in general, try to be helpful to your party in every way possible. I hope this video has been helpful. Even if it hasn't, oh well, I was going to make it anyway. Until next time, goodbye.